Today on CityCast Boise, a new GOP-backed ballot initiative could scrap Idaho's grocery sales tax. So why hasn't the Republican-led legislature just done it themselves? Meanwhile, we lead the nation in fastest rising rents while our commutes are slowing to a crawl. And we're gearing up for a weekend jamboree for the river that keeps us cool and connected. It's Friday, August 15th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. It's Friday once again, and joining me this week to break down kind of a broad swath of topics is political scientist Charlie Hunt. Thank you again so much for joining me again on the show, Charlie.
Always love hopping on. Let's do it.
Well, the first topic I wanted to discuss with you, because whenever I have you, I'm like, this is our political moment. Let's break it down. Is that there is a proposed ballot initiative that would get rid of the sales tax on groceries in Idaho. And Idaho is one of 13 states that has a sales tax on food. So I'm curious, how long have we had this? And the Republicans are backing this ballot initiative. So why hasn't the Republican-controlled legislature been able to just pass this on their own?
Ooh, a lot to get into there. We've had the sales tax on groceries for quite a while. I mean, it's one thing I have noticed when doing my taxes every year, like whatever tax app I use always asks me something about the grocery tax. And I'm like, what is this? And it's because we do have this sales tax on groceries, but we also have tax credits that sort of countermand a lot of those sales taxes. I think Governor Little signed an increase in the grocery tax credit earlier this year. And so we have these kind of attacking it from both sides. But this ballot initiative would essentially repeal the grocery tax entirely and would apply it to all the kinds of food items that the grocery tax currently covers. But the tax would remain in place for alcohol, tobacco, and restaurant sales of food. And so these are all the food items basically defined by the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So, this would be a big change. This is a 6% sales tax on food items. And so, this is something that would probably be noticed in grocery stores and has interesting timing as, sort of the conversation about inflation is starting to come into play again now that we're starting to sort of see the effects of Trump's tariffs and inflation continuing to be a big concern for a lot of Americans. So I'm guessing that that's part of what's going into the effort to do this now.
So do you think that this really maybe wasn't in the works until, we're 3/4 of a year into the Trump presidency's first year and prices keep going up every time I go to the grocery store? Is that kind of the impetus where now they're going to take potentially a repeal of this tax more seriously?
It's possible. I mean, I don't know that they would ever admit that was the case if it were the case. But I do think that, I think for a lot of conservatives in Idaho, especially economic conservatives, this has probably been a target for them for a long time that, there are only so many different kinds of taxes you can cut. And the legislature this year passed sort of more cuts to income and property taxes. We've seen this sort of year after year that Governor Little's been pursuing. And what I think they have to sort of watch out for, and where maybe some of the pushback is likely to come, is whether repealing this tax would put into jeopardy the surplus or balanced budget that our state government has been able to uphold for quite a while. That's enabled them to cut all these taxes in a bunch of different areas, and whether sort of the broadening tax base and the growth that's come in Idaho over the past couple decades is going to be able to keep up with whatever losses they have estimated are going to happen here.
Oh, but Charlie, I don't think you maybe know the Idaho legislature has made their own DOJ. And so they said they're going to make really, really strict cuts and really make sure that the budget is just right on that line. So
problem
it
solved.
shouldn't be a problem.
That's great. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, I mean it's hard to estimate from sort of an economics point of view, like exactly how much the surplus might go down or the balanced budget might be in danger as a result of repealing this. It'd be a significant chunk of change, right? Like we're a growing state and, losing 6% on all grocery items, that would be really significant. And, some Republicans, including in the legislature, have raised these potential issues. And I think to answer your earlier question, Lindsay, like that's part of where the pushback has come and maybe why the legislature hasn't acted on this in the past, that this would be a really significant sort of chunk out of the budget. Now, whether they can make that up in other areas, that sort of remains to be seen. But it does sound like, at least according to a poll that was commissioned by the Mountain States Policy Center, that 87% of Idahoans would be in favor of eliminating the sales tax on groceries. And I'm not too surprised about that. It's the easiest question in the world. Like, do you want your taxes cut? Yeah, I'd love my taxes cut. I'd love to pay less on groceries. And so it's a question of sort of whether the party can really unify behind this, and if they can get these petition signatures, which we can talk about, then maybe this has a chance of passing.
Yeah, I think if you ask just an average person, would you like your taxes to go down? I think almost across the board, they're going to say yes. So I do think that plays very well into this. But like you said, there was historic tax cuts this year to income and property tax. And then the state reporting revenue was down $141.5 million below projections. Mm-hmm. And Idaho actually doesn't track how much of sales tax revenue is generated, but the Division of Financial Management from Utah did. And they said that our projected sales tax revenue is $3.7 billion, and that if this is passed, if this becomes law, we could lose $410 million to $485 million. But because the initiative would also eliminate the grocery tax credit that costs us about $255 million as a state, it would be a loss of revenue of about $200 to $230 million. So I am curious how they're going to sell this with some of those numbers as a positive, because if we're bringing in less revenue, the cuts have to come somewhere to balance the budget.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see sort of where, not that there are that many of them in Idaho, but where Democrats and non-conservatives are going to sort of come down on something like this. Because on the one hand, right, if it's going to mean more cuts to sort of social services, probably that's not a great thing that the left would not love. On the other hand, the sales taxes generally are pretty regressive. Like they tend to hit working people the most. And so if you're going to repeal a tax, maybe that's the one to do. What I'm also really interested in going forward, Lindsay, and I'm sure you are too, is sort of like this broader question about ballot initiatives, right? The legislature has been trying to sort of raise the bar for, how tough it is to get something on the ballot. And there were just some interesting quotes in this article and Dorothy Moon has endorsed it. And she said in her statement, quote, "I know what you might be thinking. Aren't ballot initiatives tools of the left? Sometimes, yes, but there's an important difference here. This initiative was bottom up and driven entirely by the grassroots, unlike, I suppose, all the other ballot initiatives." And so it's just interesting, like a lot of other things in politics, these processes, we hate them when they're done by people we disagree with, but then we love them when it's something that serves our interests.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out when the proponents of the ballot initiative were saying, we want this done in Idaho, this is important, and out of the other side of their mouth, we should make it infinitely harder to pass ballot initiatives in our state. So I am very interested to see how that messaging plays out.
Got any fun trips coming up? One thing you probably haven't put on your packing list is learning the language. But with Babbel, you can start talking in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. And I also just persuaded my friend who's going to France this fall to learn French with Babbel, but that is another story. Babbel's extremely fun and intuitive. It's like having a private tutor in your pocket. Handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel's lessons are voiced by real native speakers and built with science-backed cognitive tools and interactive features to fit any learning style. I love a lot of the different Babbel features. The Babbel games for sentence building, Babbel speech recognition, which helps me get the pronunciation right. And now I'm really into Babbel's word of the day, which greets me on the homepage of the app. Every day, a new word revealed like a little surprise with a sentence to help contextualize it. It's like a daily treat for me. Studies from Yale, Michigan State, and other leading universities continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Look, I want you to learn another language. So I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Okay, Charlie, now I'd like to talk with you about two of the Treasure Valley's favorite topics, rent prices and traffic. And the news on both of them. Something we all love. Yeah, we love that. We love it. The news on both of them, not great, not ideal, but not all bad either necessarily, depending on how you look at things. So yeah, I wanted to jump into rent first because, again, I think if you asked most people in this area, is the rent too damn high? I think most of them would agree that it is. And Boise ranks on top again for rent prices in among the nation's 100 largest cities. So what do you think got us back on top? And do you feel surprised by this ranking at all?
I mean, it feels good to be number one again. Actually, it doesn't. This is a good thing to be number one. And I mean, there are a whole bunch of things going on here. And I think some important context that we need to sort of add to this. One is that obviously this is sort of the market trying to come back to some kind of equilibrium after the giant disruption of the pandemic, that like we're still feeling some of that, this far down the road. This apartment list, which is the group that put this out, tracked in Boise, over a yearly basis from, 2019 through today, the, monthly percentage growth in rent across the year. And you can see these giant spikes in 2020 and then in particularly in 2021, where you have this giant pandemic disruption. And, if you look at what they've got for 2025 so far, like, yes, the rent prices are increasing into July, but the growth rates are also in rent prices are also still behind where they were in 2024 and 2022. And so, it's important to note, like, we should see what happens the rest of the year. Obviously, this is capturing something that is happening not just in Boise, but in a lot of Western cities where there's been a lot of growth and not a lot of time for, especially after the pandemic, for construction to really catch up. Like, I mean, especially like the last 3 years in Boise, the construction has been like out of control, right? Mm-hmm. There's been so much new construction, but even that can't keep up with the kinds of growth we're seeing. Again, not just in Boise, but of course in places like Meridian and Nampa as well.
Yeah. And I thought it was also really interesting in the Idaho Statesman article about this, that they talked about how Boise's vacancy rate is still high-ish, but it's not, it was at 2% in 2015, which was, they were very concerned about how many houses were, like, prices were up and there just wasn't housing available. It's right now at 6.5%, which they said is much more in line with the national average. So not as much as we need, definitely not as much affordable housing as we need, but it's not at the point it was in 2015. It's not, we aren't so far behind that we're dipping into places we were before. So it also, is just the issue of there's so many people, and even despite all of that construction, it just, it takes time to build housing.
Yeah. And it seems like at least we are out of that sort of, kind of crisis mode of like 2% vacancy rate is really, really low. That makes it pretty much impossible to find an affordable place to live. Obviously, it's still really hard, but they also note, right, that among those same 100 cities, Boise ranks 69th in median overall rent. And so it's not like we have the highest rents in the nation.
Yeah.
What we are number one in is sort of the change, the sort of the percentage change in median rent. And so that means we're rising fast, but it's not like we're as expensive as like San Francisco or Seattle. So we're not quite in those depths yet. But hey, maybe give it another 10 years.
Yeah, we can shoot for the moon. We can top lists all day long.
Reach
That's
for the stars.
Boise loves.
Yeah.
Okay, Charlie, I also, while I have you here, wanted to ask, how does your commute feel? Is it feeling longer or shorter or doable or amazing? How's your commute?
My commute's not so bad. I mean, I live pretty close into town in Boise, and so I'm biking a lot of the time. That's my way of trying to avoid the commute. The construction's been pretty tough in a lot of places, but I gather that it is maybe worse or getting a little bit worse, especially for the places where, frankly, even more people are moving, which is Meridian and Nampa and Star, right? And Caldwell, where you're sort of commuting in on the highway. And I gather we've got some new data to support that.
Yeah, there was another Idaho Statesman article I want to shout out that talked about how it was interesting. There was a lot of really interesting data in this article, but they mentioned that, yes, if you're feeling like my commute from Meridian, Nampa, really anywhere where you have to use the connector is getting worse, that's accurate. It is. It is not as long technically as commutes before the pandemic, just because they opened that Nampa corridor. So if you were coming from Caldwell circa 2018, it probably took a few minutes longer. But after the widening of that road, now we just have so many people that it is getting longer again. And I can testify to that. That commute is hellishly long and feels incredibly dangerous sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely noticed the highways gotten busier. I mean, it's so interesting because, like, I have to say, as a former East Coaster, like they talk in this article about how, you know, of a 33 minute commute from Caldwell, folks will spend between like 4 and 7 minutes in traffic. And like, as a former East Coaster, the idea of spending only 4 to 7 minutes in traffic in a half-hour commute, like any commuter in a decent sized East Coast city would take that in a heartbeat. And I'm not saying we're not allowed to complain, like complaining about traffic is our God-given right. But I think it's important to recognize that, like, this is not a problem that's unique to this area, but I do think it's one that has more impact than it otherwise might, because folks who grew up here or have spent a lot of time here maybe aren't so used to dealing with it.
Yeah. And I do also want to note, when we're talking about this, about 30 minutes in traffic, the average CityCast Boise episode is shorter than 30 minutes. But, you know, we hit it right around there. So it's actually still very perfect for your commute. So if you're like, what am I going to do for that time? CityCast Boise is a great answer. Just
spend some time with Lindsay.
I want us to be solution-based when we're talking about traffic. Okay, they had a list of the top 10 congested roads in Ada County that lead onto or off of the interstate. And so I wanted to ask you, just to guess, during the afternoon, so the PM hours, the traffic hours, you know, probably around 4 to 5 p.m., which road leading onto the interstate do you think is the most congested? And then also, which one in the AM?
Oh boy. Which road? I mean, I would have to guess, like, the closer you are into the connector, probably it's going to be worse. I mean, Eagle Road, I feel like, is just all, like, no matter where you are on Eagle Road, it's kind of a nightmare. I would guess Franklin Road near the mall and stuff. That seems like a big potential. And then maybe like 10 Mile or Meridian Road, like leading right into Meridian. Probably those are some hot spots. I don't commute around Meridian, so like I'm not an expert in this area, but I would guess like the closer you are into the connector, the more you're going to get that like Boise-based congestion.
Those were great guesses. Yes, according to this article, the number one worst, most congested road in the PM is the Franklin Boulevard onto I-84, which we've all seen everyone stuck on there and thought,
yep,
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all of you. My heart goes out to you. And then, yes, in the morning, eastbound, it's Meridian Road. And as a Meridianite, I can testify, I have never felt less connected to my fellow humans than when I'm trying to get on the interstate in the morning on Meridian Road. I'm like, we're not friends, we're not family, we're not sharing a city, we're all enemies, it feels like, trying to get on that road.
Yeah, we're all in the same horrific jungle when we're out there together. Nobody is their best selves unless they're listening to CityCast Boise, I guess.
Exactly. We're relaxing. We need to add maybe an ASMR element. We're gonna relax, stimulate that vagal nerve, get everybody relaxed, because traffic is no joke. Okay, let's take a hard left away from all of our traffic woes and get into our picks of the week. And I wanted to start this week because Boise Art Museum recently opened their James Castle Perspectives exhibit. They had an opening celebration, and one of the first times I went to the Boise Art Museum, I saw some James Castle art, and I've kind of just been fascinated and I'm a huge fan of the art that he made. And for anybody who hasn't heard of him, he was born in Garden Valley in 1899, and he was deaf and wasn't trained in art at all. So he used a lot of just like materials around him. He used, dirt, he used spit, he used, torn up pieces of paper. And it's just, I think, a testament to the creative spirit of humanity that he was making art about the things around him just because it brought him joy and he was expressive. So anyway, I'm really excited about this exhibit. It's actually going to be going through mid-January. So you don't have to run out this weekend, but I was just so excited to see that they've got a new exhibit up, and it's called Perspectives. And I'm just so glad that they are highlighting this local artist who I think had a really big impact on how we view art and how we view artistic expression. So
that is an awesome pick, Lindsay. I can't wait to go see this. I haven't been to the art museum in over a year. I'm way overdue. I also should note, I live in Collister, just like a couple of blocks from the James Castle House. And I've been meaning to go now for years to sort of check it out and learn more about him. And so it sounds like this would be a good like weekend activity. Hit up the James Castle House, learn some stuff, and then go see the art, or vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, I highly recommend it. Yeah. If you want to do both, I think that would be an amazing, amazing day. So, okay, Charlie, what is your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is a cool looking event that is happening tomorrow, which is Saturday, August 16th. It's in Ann Morrison Park. It is the City of Boise's Water Jamboree, and I can't resist anything that is called a jamboree. It is commemorating the 75th anniversary of building the water renewal services. When that happened, the river was totally littered with trash, and they built water renewal services to basically stop pollution. And now, 75 years later, the river's really clean. A lot of us float it every year. We can feel comfortable going in it and not like we're ingesting something terrible. And I really like this because it's kind of like a way of putting an exclamation point on a policy win. Like we see this all the time with big federal legislation like Obamacare or the infrastructure legislation, where there's all this money invested, a lot of things are built, and lots of lives are saved in many cases. But because this stuff usually takes, years or even decades, the public has no idea about the wins. Like they don't, and I don't expect them to make the connection between some legislation that was passed a while ago and some policy outcome. And it makes it so that voters aren't really able to factor these wins into their calculus about like who to vote for, which policies they like. And so I'm all about celebrations like these, whether it's something I personally support or not. And in this case, I think a clean Boise River is something I feel like we can all get behind.
No, I absolutely love this pick of the week. And I wanted to give a quick shout out to the City of Boise social media. They had a fantastic reel about this that is kind of horrifying because they talk about all the things being dumped in the Boise River.
Yeah.
And that was shocking. And I was eating and I had to stop for a minute. But I love it because, like you said, I think we slip into this pattern of just thinking that the way things are is how they've always been. And so we see the Boise River, we're like, we float it, we play in it. It's wonderful. It's gorgeous to walk down the Greenbelt. It doesn't smell awful. It's not full of harmful things. And I just think like, well, of course it's that way. It's a river. It's been here forever. But it's not true. Like 80, 90 years ago, it was a horrifying place that smelled awful. And that changed because people took initiative. There was legislation passed. There were rules set. And so now we get to enjoy it today because of that. So I think that is a fantastic reminder.
Yeah, it's a great way to celebrate and like remind ourselves that we've done something good. And so the Jamboree, it'll be tomorrow on August 16th. It'll have face painting, snacks, and music. And it's going to go from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Right in the center of Van Morrison Park next to the fountain. And it is free, best of all.
I love it. I always love a free event. We're girlies on a budget. So
we are.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me again this week and sharing your perspective with us, and have a fantastic time at the Jamboree.
Thanks, Lindsay. See you next time.
CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it over at citycast.fm/survey. It just takes a few minutes. Plus, survey takers will be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and CityCast swag. That's citycast.fm/survey. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. The show is produced by Evelyn Avitia, Frankie Barnhill, Elizabeth Kama, and me, Lindsay Van Allen. Blake Hunter writes our Hey Boise newsletter with help this week from Adrian Gonzalez. And our music is by Up Is The Down Is The, All The Kimonos, and Hip Color. If you enjoyed our show today, leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back on Monday with another great local story. Catch you then.